Hello, my name is Isaac Newton. Today, for you, I am going to draw my life. I was born in Lincolnshire, England in 1643. I lived in Woolsthorpe Manor with my mom because my dad died shortly before I was born. A few years later, my mom decided to remarry and move away, so I stayed in Woolsthorpe Manor with my grandparents. I attended grammar school in Grantham, where my true passion was science. I loved constructing mechanical models and toys in my spare time. My mom wanted me to follow in my father's footsteps and become a farmer, but I really wanted to go back to school. So, I attended college and became an undergrad at Trinity College, Cambridge in 1661. Cambridge was struck with the plague in 1665, so I decided to return to Grantham for a bit. I returned to university in Cambridge in 1667 as a Don. This established my reputation for mathematical brilliance. Shortly after I graduated, I developed a method for calculating rates of change which I called differential calculus. Because of this accomplishment of mine, I was offered the Lucasian Chair of Mathematics at Cambridge. Then I started experimenting with light. With these discoveries, I was able to build a reflecting telescope that actually worked. I tried to improve it more so I could present it to the Royal Society. They liked it so much, they asked me to present a paper on my theory of lights and colors. I had done some experiments with prisms and discovered that white light is just a mixture of all the different colors. A few scientists like me were trying to determine how planetary motion worked, so I decided to do some research into the topic as well. I believed that there needed to be a set of rules governing motion both on Earth and in space, so I continued to do research on the matter. After many nights spent doing that research, I was able to come up with 3 laws of motion that explained how and why things move in the way they do. I had not yet made my discoveries public, but an astronomer convinced me to publish a book that explained my theories. And just like that, the mathematical principles of natural philosophy was born. This book of mine, referred to as Principia, talks all about my mathematical and scientific discoveries. My first law of motion involves the concept of inertia. A body at rest remains at rest, or a body in constant motion remains in constant motion along a straight line unless it is acted on by an external force. For example, if someone starts to run, they will continue to move until something, like a brick wall, stops them from moving. My second law of motion states that a net force acting on a body produces an acceleration. The acceleration is inversely proportional to its mass and directly proportional to the net force in the same direction. So, if an apple falls from a tree, it will fall at a speed related to its weight. If a pumpkin were to fall from the tree, it would fall faster than the apple because it weighs a lot more. My third law of motion became the most known law. It states that when one body exerts a force on a second body, the second body exerts an equal and opposite force on the first body. An example of this is someone jumping from a boat onto land. In the process, when the person jumps forward, the boat will move backwards. The jumping is the action and the movement of the boat is the reaction. These 3 laws led me to construct a theory of gravity which stated that every mass attracts every other mass in the universe with a force that is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. Are you confused? You are not alone. This theory accounts for both the force that causes the planets to orbit the sun, like my good friend Kepler explained, and the downward force that causes objects to accelerate towards the Earth, like Galileo taught us. Basically, there is a force called gravity that causes things to fall to the ground instead of floating off into space. If there was not a force that pulled everything towards the Earth, the moon would have floated off a long time ago. A force was clearly keeping the moon in orbit around the Earth. I had learned so much about the way the world looked, which is why I wrote Principia. I wanted to share my knowledge with the world. I spent so much time working on Principia that it began to consume my life. Sometimes I would be so busy working that I would forget to eat or sleep. That didn't matter to me though, because the book came out perfectly. It was everything I had hoped it would be. After the release of Principia, many people considered me to be the most prominent scientist of my generation. In 1701, I had decided to retire from my duties at Cambridge. I was elected president of the Royal Society in 1703, and I was re-elected for 25 years following my initial election. In 1704, I published a book called Optics, which focused on my discovery of light refraction with prisms and lenses and the behavior of color mixes. This book of mine became more popular than Principia, and a year later, I was knighted by Queen Anne. I mean, what an accomplishment! After this achievement, I began to enjoy my days as an old and retired scientist. Eventually, I decided I wanted to live out my days in Cranberry Park, which is near Winchester. My niece lives here with her husband, so I decided to spend the rest of my days with family. Now, I spend a lot of time relaxing because I accomplished enough during my younger years to support my years of retirement. Thank you for listening to my life. This is Isaac Newton signing off.